Servlet Filters has many advantages. Once if you understand why Servlet Filter has to be created, then you would really love to include Servlet Filters in your projects. Let us first understand the importance of filter. What exactly the English keyword filter, what exactly the meaning is there, the same meaning is applied here. There is no additional meaning that comes here. Servlet filter means that you are filtering something, you are doing some activity. Where are you doing that activity? Where are you actually filtering and what are you filtering? This is what you are going to learn. Upon learning this thing, love to work with Servlet filters. Fantastic concept it is. Let us imagine if there is no filter. If there is no filter that is used, then basically your request and response looks like as in the way that I am showing in the diagram. It's a plain request and there is response. I call it as a plain request because the request is sending to the server as in the way it was given by the user. In middle, there is no filter that is used. It means that there is a provision that before the request is submitted to the server, in middle you can use the server. Middle means in the application server itself. In the application server itself, before the request hits your Servlet program or JSP program, or anything else. Okay, basically what you request, HTML page or Servlet page or JSP page, maybe like any resource that is stored in your server, right? So before the request is submitted to any one of the resources, you can filter it if you want. You can filter it. Before I talk about what can we really filter, what kind of advantages that we will be having by placing a filter before the request hits the application server, and more or less I wanted to show how the filter looks like in the application server. This is basically your web server or application server. In the application server, you have resources like servlets, JSPs and static files. And before actually, this is your client. This time the request is not directly hitting your resource. Before the request hits any one of the resources that belongs to the application server, it hits Servlet filter. Servlet filter is basically a class. It's a simple Java class. Using the Java class, you can filter. Doubtlessly, any web application you take nowadays has to use filter. Without filter, none of our HTTP request is submitted to the application server. So I'm damn sure. Are you opening WhatsApp? Yes, filtering is done. Every time you open your WhatsApp, your request, the filtering is done. Are you uploading any images to the WhatsApp? Yes, filtering is done. In what manner, sir? Compression, decompression. Do you think your images are directly sent? Because since your image is 2 MB, do you think 2 MB will be traveled in your network? No. WhatsApp will definitely have a compression technique which compresses your image to maximum extent. That compressed image will be submitted to the application server of WhatsApp. There, the decompression has to take place. So here, who has to do that? Your Servlet program basically which collects the image and stores in the database. The activity is different. But who has to compress and who has to decompress? Your Servlet filter has to do these things. In the same way, you will never find any application without protection or security nowadays. Encryption and decryption. Whenever you are providing username and password, banking kind of application has to protect the user's credentials. In such case, every banking application has to encrypt at user level and decrypt at the application level. Who has to do this one? There should be a separate program. That program is called as filter. That is what the importance of filter. Apart from these two activities, one regular activity you can do it. If request has sent, but that request is not in a proper way according to the rules and regulations of application server. That's what we call it as validation. If the data is not according to the format or the rules and regulations that you have taken into the account as part of your application, then you can filter it. There will be a program whenever the format is not correct, your filter will do that. It arranges the data accordingly, just like an interface in middle. These are the activities that we can do. In reality, you can never find any web application without a Servlet filter. You can never have applications, plain applications like this. You can never submit a plain request like this. Now, I hope you got the point. You should have learned where these filters are used and what are these filters. Now, we should write a program. I need to show you. But I can't show you the compression kind of program or encryption kind of program or server-side big validations I can't do right now. To make you understand, what I do is that whenever HTTP request is sent to the application server to my project, if I wanted to access any page, I have written a Servlet program, a Servlet filter program in such a way, it increments the count, the variable count. That variable is an attribute that is maintained in the context. It's a global variable. That global attribute, whatever the value is there, whenever a fresh request comes, I'll count the number of hits. For an example, let us imagine there exists a HTML file in my application server. I wanted to count the total number of times that page was hit by the users. This is what I'm going to do now. I've created a servlet filter which basically increments that count. Every time a user wants some web address, when before the home page is loaded, meanwhile servlet filter program will be executed and a count variable will be incremented by 1. Every time I visit that page, or me or anybody visiting that particular page, the count value has to be incremented. This thing we can do it with filter, and this thing can only be done with filter because this program has to be executed before the actual request is sent to that particular page. Right now, this is the program that we are going to do. This is the program basically. In our program, there is a count variable, which is a global variable, which is basically initialized with 0. Being a client, I'll be accessing an HTML file. The moment I access any HTML file, what happens means immediately this filter class will be executed without our knowledge. All these things happens internally, okay? Filter class will be executed. While executing this filter class gets the current value of count and increments that count by 1. And if I wanted to test, because whenever I visit the HTML file, how would I be knowing the number of hits? To know the number of hits, I need to write a separate servlet class called as servlet class. The name of the program is servlet. So to show the count, I need to write a separate servlet program. That servlet program displays the count for me. Okay. So what I do is that basically I'll be writing a HTML file, a servlet filter class, and a normal servlet program. A normal servlet program displays the count value. A servlet filter class will increment the count value whenever any resource request is made to the web application. This HTML file is the resource that is accessed by the user. So when user accesses this HTML file by the very first time, the count value is 1. If I refresh, that means the second visit, then count value becomes 2. If I refresh 10 times, the count value becomes 10. If I refresh 20 times, then count value has to become 20 times. So how would I be knowing that it is getting 20 or 30, that count? I need to go to servlet program and need to check. So for that reason, what I have done is that in the HTML file itself, I have kept a link to go to this particular servlet. Upon pressing that link, I'll be knowing the count. Okay, this is a program I wanted to show you. This will definitely demonstrate the importance of servlet filters. Filter class, only the thing that you need to know. How to create this filter class, now you need to know. Right now, to create a filter class, the following things are used. We need to use a filter interface. This has to be implemented. And we need to override a method called as doFilter. doFilter takes 3 arguments. One is servlet request X, servlet response Y, filter chain X. Filter chain is a thing that is related to this interface. And there is one method called as doFilter that has to be executed because filter program has to be kept in chain. If one filter is executed, that means one time if you are incrementing the count, by the next time also you have to do it whenever there is a second request. So it's a never-ending process. The filters has to be invoked and they are kept in the chain. And when first filter is invoked, when first request is made, and then the first filter will be destroyed. By the second request is made, again the second filter has to be invoked. To do this filtering kind of thing, chaining kind of thing for the filters, we use a function called as a method called as doFilter, which takes 2 parameters, request and response. And chain is an inbuilt object that is used to call this method doFilter. So that's all. These 3 things we are going to use in order to create the filter. We are going to create a filter class and servlet class and everything using Apache Netbeans. That's all. Now let's execute the program. And before we execute the program, I wanted to show you one thing. Here there is a web.xml file. Generally in web.xml file, there are things that are related to servlet name, class name and everything. Since you are going to create a class, which is not servlet basically, it's a filter class. A filter will also will be having its own mapping because a filter has to be called. Okay, filter has to be executed. If it has to be executed means a proper URL pattern has to be there. So basically whenever you hit the HTML file, basically the filter has to be executed. It should have its own pattern. So the URL pattern here given as start.html. Start.html, it means that if user clicks any HTML file within your web application, count has to be incremented by 1. Automatically, the counter filter will be executed. Counter filter class will be executed. Whenever the URL pattern start means anything followed by .html. If it is given and if it is related to your web application, then automatically this filter is going to be executed. Counter filter is going to be executed, and every time this count will be incremented by 1. Okay, so we don't have to update these things, and we can do it our filter using Apache Netbeans. You can create a filter class using Apache Netbeans. You can include all these URL patterns within the Apache Netbeans itself. Okay, so just for convenience, I have shown you that this is the kind of thing that we need to include as part of web.xml file for filter class. As in the way we are doing for Servlet, in the same way we need to do for filters. Filter and filter mapping, two things. And if you wanted to execute or increment the count whenever you open any resource, then don't keep anything in the URL pattern. .*html means only when you are accessing HTML. There you can write a regular expression and you can do it if you wanted to. Whenever .java file or .jpeg file, if somebody is accessing some image, and we wanted to keep a cap that counts the total number of times that image is downloaded or viewed by the user, then you can do it using filter by having an URL pattern star.jpeg. Instead of HTML, you can write a JPEG. Any static content, you can keep it in the URL pattern. Now let's open Apache Netbeans. Before that, I'll show you the programs with the filter program I wanted to show you. And here is the counter filter.java. This is the filter program. Here I told you that we need to implement the filter. This is the name that is given to the filter, implements the filter. Filter is the interface, and you need to create a config because we are going to access context. So filter config, for this filter config is an inbuiltly available class for which you are creating a class, object config. Config is the object. So this is the type. Config is a simple variable or like a reference variable whose type is filter config. This config will be used to create while creating a context. Now this is to initialize your config. So whenever you are initiating this filter class, immediately that reference will be given to this config, whatever you have given, whatever you have created. Basically, whenever you have created this one, basically it is null. The moment you have initiated, that configuration will be given here. Okay, to this will be initialized. So it is more or less like a class variable which is getting initialized with the function called as init method. Okay, next. Do filter, just like do post and do get, we have do filter method here, and which takes two parameters. About these three parameters I have discussed just now: request, response, and filter chain. And here you are going to create a context, and the variable name is the attribute name is the count, and it is an integer type. And you get that attribute using a method called as get attribute. This is the attribute name, and the value will be retrieved, and the value will be kept in count. What are the existing value is there, that will be kept in the count. By the very first time, there won't be any count attribute. In case if count attribute is null, that means if count is null, here you are creating a variable in which you are storing the value of the count. In case if you get the null, that means you didn't get anything from the statement. It means that if the statement is returning null, it means that you don't have the count attribute. When you don't have the count attribute, you need to create one using set attribute. Okay, and here whenever your count value is null, then you are assigning an integer value 0 to it. And here an integer class is used, and instead of using an integer existing class, you can directly use 0 also. It's not a problem. Okay, count equals to 0 you can keep. Okay, instead of writing count equals to new integer 0, and you can keep count equals to 0, like this also you can keep, not a problem. In the same way, in such case if null, then the count will be assigned as 0. Otherwise the existing count value plus 1. Okay, then the value will be incremented by 1. When you don't have anything, the count value becomes 0, and upon becoming 0, it immediately becomes 1 because you got a request, the first request. To show that first request, the value is 1. The plus 1 has to be done. Okay, to retrieve the existing value of the count.int value function is used. Plus 1 is done, and to set that value to the count, because the incremented value you need to set to the count. The servlet which is extracting this count has to see that updated value, right? So you need to set that value. Every time you update a value to the count, to the count is an internal variable. I hope you got the point. It's an internal variable in the filter class, and you are updating that value to the attribute count. To avoid confusion, the same names are taken into the account for the variable name and the attribute name. This is the attribute, and this is the value that you are going to assign to the attribute. Once after doing this one, I told you that filtering is a chaining process, that once filter is a class that every time it is executed, infinite number of times there could be some requests that are possible in a web application. For each time a web resource is requested, this filter class has to be executed. So there is no count. This function executes this number of times. It's a chaining process. That's why to do this repeatedly, chain.doFilter by passing request and response is done. Okay. Finally, destroy method, which is an optional. If you want to manually destroy it upon not using this one, then you can do it. That's all. And we have a routinely display count servlet program which extracts the count attribute and keeps in a variable called as count and displays it. And one thing I wanted to tell you here, the displaying is done on a browser. Okay, you know that sometimes the data is cached. For an example, if there exists some page, you will be pressing, if you are there very long time on that particular page, if content value is some 1 or 2, and for an example, let us imagine that live streaming of IPL match, if you have opened that page, okay, that page will be refreshed every time. The data that gets into that particular page will be cached in our local memory. For an example, India is batting. Okay, IPL Mumbai is batting. Okay, starting runs are 10. Every minute a ball will be updated and a run has to be updated. And it means that you can see that live streaming, that page has to be updated. Every second the page has to be updated. It means that it has to clear the local cache and update that local cache with the new value. If a person Virat Kohli has taken one more run, then existing score has to become 10 plus 1. So here, basically to show that example, that kind of example, here I'm going to count the value because my previous value, if it is cached, even though I increment the count, I can't see the updated value because my cache is not updated. To avoid that headache, what I have done is that in the HTML, I'm not using cache at all. I'm requesting my browser, dear browser, to this particular activity, don't use cache. I'm saying content equals to no cache. If I cache, what happens means, even though I make 20 requests, my count should be 20, but still it shows 1 for long amount of time. Okay, depends upon the browser settings. Browser clears the cache for every 2 minutes or 5 minutes. I don't know. It depends upon the browser settings and your user settings. And we can't wait that long time to see our count, right? That's why I'm not going to use any cache here. Right. Now we'll execute this program. All these files, you know, this file, I made it available in Apache Netbeans readily. We'll execute that. First of all, this is a filtered HTML file. And here my request will be redirected upon pressing click here. Because the moment I'm visiting this HTML file, without our knowledge, count attribute is created. Count attribute value has become initialized to 0. Since it is the first request, the count is incremented by 1 and the value is updated to the count attribute. And this display count servlet program displays that count for me. This is what going to happen. All these things are going to happen upon one single click. Okay, right now. So this is our filter class. Counter filter is the name that I have given. Now the point here is that in Apache Netbeans, sir, this is not a normal servlet program. Yes, it's not a normal servlet program. In your normal servlet program, there will be a do get and do post method will be there, and you might be using HTTP servlet package. I mean, you would be extending HTTP servlet class. These things are not happening here. So it's not a servlet program. It's not a normal servlet program. It is servlet filter class. So how to create that thing means right click on your demo project. I hope you are able to see, or else I'll zoom in. Right click on demo project and here go to new. Here you have option servlet HTML filter. If you are unable to find the filter, go to other and you will be able to do it. Press on that one, filter. Please give the filter class and then press next, and you will be getting, do I need to write in web.xml file? Yes, write in the web.xml file. Say next, that's all, anytime. That is the way you need to create. How exactly you are creating a servlet class? In the same way, you need to select the option filter. Don't select normal servlet option. It is not normal servlet program. It's a filter program. Choose filter option in the Apache Netbeans. Right now, I have chosen the same thing and I'm able to do it. Now let's see the web.xml file. This is our web.xml file and filter mapping is done here. Okay, the URL pattern is written in such a way, if I access any file in my project, demo project, automatically the counter filter will be executed. Not only the HTML file, if I write anything, okay, /star, if I access anything. If you wanted to do it particularly for HTML, then star.html you need to give. Okay, I'm not restricting, so it can be anything. That's it. Now let's execute filter HTML. So before that, let me build this project once. Run the file. What happened, I have accessed filter HTML file. It is one of the files that are placed in demo project. It means that count attribute is created, was initialized to 0. Since it is the first request, incremented by 1, and upon click here to see count, I should see that count. The current count is 2 because it's being accessed 2 times. Before we made the request, once the default value 1 is taken into the account. Now I'll get back here. I'm refreshing it. What do you mean by refresh? A fresh request is made to the same resource. Request is made. Now I'll see the count. Count is 4. Now I'll get back. I'll keep on refreshing 10 times, 20 times, like that. Now let me see the count. 37 times. Get back. Refresh again. Keep on pressing. Let's see whether the count is getting incremented. 55 times. I hope you got the point. This count is just like a cap that you can keep on web pages, images, videos, view count. Okay, basically it's a view count. If you wanted to do it, then we can do it using such kind of filters.